Starting us off at number 10 is Julia Johnson. Back in April of 1925, at around 2 p.m. in the afternoon, 5-year-old Julia Johnson was seen by the blacksmith across the street playing alone outside her house in Winnipeg. At 3:50 p.m., Julia's neighbor Pauline Krall had a conversation with her, and that was the last time anyone saw or spoke to Julia. 5 minutes after the conversation, Pauline's son came home and told his mum that Julia's mum was looking for her, and within 20 minutes, a search party was sent out looking for the child. Julia was a shy girl that wouldn't venture far from home for no reason. The adults had no clue how she could have disappeared within that 5-minute window. Extensive searches were underway, but Julia was never found. 9 years later, when a building near the family home was being repurposed, a machinist was dismantling a boiler in the basement. Inside the boiler, he found the mummified body of Julia Johnson. There was no evidence left, none to the point the coroner had no idea whether it was a murder or just an accident. Police then tried to think of who would have had access to the building at that time, and building manager John Goodwin claimed he left the key at the blacksmith's shop, but both blacksmiths denied this. Someone was lying, we just don't know who it was. Was it John Goodwin or was it the blacksmiths? Coming in at number 9 is the Highway of Tears. This entire mystery revolves around 725 kilometers of Highway 16 between Prince George and Prince Rupert, British Columbia. From 1970 till now, there have been a string of murders at this location, and its name was coined in 1998. The RCMP Project EPANA claimed there are less than 18 victims, but Indigenous organizations don't believe that. Because such a high number of victims were First Nations women, they claim the victim numbers go as high as 40 and that these women were just abducted off the highway. Reasons behind the murders are endless. Some point to poverty and drug abuse, others say they're due to systemic racism, and others claim hitchhikers are targeted because their location is so remote and isolated. Of all the cases, only one has ever been solved. Cody Lejerbokov killed 3 women and a teenage girl in the Highway of Tears area and was later convicted. But that's the culprit of 4 of those murders? What about the other 36 that still go unsolved? At number 8, we have Christine Jessup. And this one may go down in history as one of Canada's most infamous cold cases. Back in October of 1984, 9-year-old Christine Jessup got dropped by the school bus outside her home in Queensville, Ontario. Christine was alone since her parents were at work at the time, but she somehow disappeared. Her body was found 2 months later in a wooded area more than 50 kilometers away from her home. Autopsy results showed she had been raped before being stabbed to death, and in a rush to arrest someone for the horrendous crime, suspicion fell on the Jessup's next-door neighbor, Guy Paul Morin, who was quickly arrested and convicted of Christine's murder. I hate cases like that when you're so in a rush to arrest somebody that you just arrest the first person you think of, which is usually always false. Guy literally had a solid alibi. He was at work and his timestamp even proved it. It was impossible he had kidnapped her, but he was still arrested. It took 11 years for him to be exonerated after an inquiry report said the evidence in the case had been tailored to suit the police's theory of Guy killing her. The police even bullied a witness about her timeline. They even left cigarette butts by the house since Guy was a smoker. All that while, the real killer was still at large. He was reinvestigated and found guilty in 1992, but was finally freed in 1995 when the DNA test proved he wasn't a match. Imagine being in jail for that bloody long, wrongfully. And so many people are. So many people are. Filling at number 7 slot are the babes in the woods. That term is frequently used to describe a case with multiple child victims discovered in the forest, which is exactly what this case is. Back in 1953, the bodies of 2 young boys were found in Stanley Park, Vancouver. The corpses were so badly decomposed that on initial observation, the medical examiner thought one of the victims was a girl. Further examination led the team to conclude that the victims had been dead for 6 years already. It took till 1998 for DNA testing to prove that both victims were in fact boys and brothers, but till this day they've remained unidentified. All officers knew about the case was that they were both killed with a hatchet. One was 10 and the other was 7, and both seemed to be Caucasian. Police started looking for mothers who were missing their children, and they were tipped off about a redhead with 2 kids who had been taken by loggers a few years prior. The case stayed cold till 2018 when detectives decided to use DNA sites like 23andMe and Ancestry to try and identify the boys. Currently though, there is still no identification. Now, number 6 is Dino Bravo. Adolfo Bresciano was an Italian immigrant living in Quebec. His day job was being the professional wrestler Dino Bravo, and I don't know how much you guys know about wrestling because I honestly don't know a lot, but Dino was named Canada's strongest man by the World Wrestling Federation in the 80s, so I mean, huge flex. He ended up retiring in 1992, and less than a year later, in March of 93, his body was found shot to death. Dino was found sitting at home filled with 17 bullets, and no one could figure out who was behind the seemingly random murder. Rumors started floating that the mafia killed Dino for his involvement in a cigarette smuggling ring. Dino was related to Vic Catroni, who was a mobster, and he used his fame to secure connections in the underworld. As he progressed, he became responsible for bigger projects, one of which was a shipment worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. The shipment was apprehended by police, which led to people thinking his death was mob retaliation. Even one of Dino's previous opponents, Bret Hart, said Dino told them he knew his days were numbered. So maybe he was just a hit in the mob's many hits? Who knows? Coming in at number 5 is Carrie Ann Brown. This case is the most infamous case coming out of the province of Manitoba, so let's explore it. 15-year-old Carrie was at a party with her best friend Nicole on the 16th of October 1986. The two were waiting outside the house about to leave when Nicole went inside to grab something she had forgotten. By the time she came back outside, Carrie had disappeared. All Nicole could see was a single set of footprints walking in the snow. The situation freaked her out even more so since Carrie was meant to sleep at her house that night, so what was she going to tell Carrie's parents? Her father reported her missing at 4 p.m. the next day, and less than 40 hours after she was last seen, her dead body was found in a wooded area outside her hometown, Thompson. Autopsy results showed that Carrie had been raped before being killed, and DNA tests concluded that 2 people were involved. A local man was charged with the crime but was let go a few months later due to lack of evidence. Until this day, the case remains unsolved. At number 4 is Kimberly Ann McAndrew. Back in August of 1989, 19-year-old Kimberly McAndrew, a student at Dalhousie University, left her shift at Canadian Tire a few minutes early. That was the last time anyone saw her alive. She had plans that night to go to the Halifax Busker Festival with her family and boyfriend, but obviously she never showed up. A witness reported seeing her buying flowers at Penhall Moor in Dartmouth, but Tom Martin, the police detective on the case, highly doubted that. See, if you don't know the layout of Halifax, Halifax is here and Dartmouth is like here, and you can either take McDonald Bridge to get there or a ferry. They're not super close, and it's a bit of a mission to get to Dartmouth, and the only reason I know this is because my ex went to Dalhousie and I visited him a lot. Either way, anyone, including Kim, would have never made the trip to Dartmouth considering she had plans that evening, so Martin suspected that whatever happened to her happened in the Canadian Tire parking lot, and I do agree with Martin. To this day, neither her or her body have ever been found. I just don't understand why you'd go to Dartmouth to buy flowers and you can buy flowers in Halifax. Filling at number 3 slot is Lynn Harper. Back in July of 1957, 12-year-old Lynn Harper and her family had relocated to Clinton, Ontario since her dad had recently joined the military. In June of 1959, Lynn went missing near RCAF station and her body was found 2 days later at a farm nearby. Police officers automatically turned to Lynn's 14-year-old school friend Stephen Truscott since he was the last person who saw Lynn alive. That evening, Stephen gave her a ride on his bike from school towards County Road. No one has any idea what took place on that bike ride, but officers assumed that when the two reached Lawson's Bush, Stephen raped and then killed her. According to Stephen, though, he had left her at the intersection of County Road and Highway 8, and the next time he looked back, he saw her getting into some random Chevrolet. Despite his account, he was charged and tried as an adult, first being sentenced to death and then just to life in prison. He was paroled 10 years later and was acquitted of all charges in 2007 after a major miscarriage of justice. Lynn's real abductor and killer remains unknown, but imagine how stupid you have to be to focus all your attention on a 14-year-old boy when there are other viable suspects in Clinton. Now, at number 2 are the Hemlock Valley murders. Back in 1995, the bodies of 3 women were found near the Agassiz Mountains in Vancouver. The victims, Tammy Pipe, Victoria Yanka, and Tracy Olajide, were all prostitutes in their 30s working in downtown Vancouver. So already we know the killer had a preference in who they liked to target. hit, prostitutes in their 30s. All three were assaulted and then murdered before being left near the mountains, and thankfully with this case, officers kind of already knew who the culprit was: Ronald Richard McCauley. Ronald had a history of assaulting prostitutes and had already served 17 years for 2 rapes and attempted murders. He was imprisoned again shortly after the bodies were found, but there was no way to link him to the crimes. The semen samples from the crime scene were too degraded, but thankfully as forensic technology improved, they were able to test his sample in 2001. It wasn't a match. So after relying on the killer being in jail all those years, the police got a huge wake-up call when they realized the case was still ongoing. I hate cases involving prostitutes because prostitute cases are the ones that police least look into, because I don't know why, maybe they're just a lower demographic of the population, but they are still as important as any part of the population. Look into those cases. And finally, at number 1 is Louis Sam. Back in 1884, an American mob crossed over the border from Nooksack, USA to Abbotsford, Canada, and lynched 14-year-old Sam. The boy was accused of murdering a shopkeeper in Nooksack called James Bell, and when he returned to Abbotsford, his people, the present-day Sumas First Nation people, turned him over to BC authorities because they figured they would know how to deal with the matter. While Sam was awaiting his trial, the angry mob captured him and hanged him from a tree near the border. After investigation, it became extremely clear that Sam did not kill James Bell and that the 2 men who riled up the mob in the first place were the most likely culprits. 2 BC officers went to Nooksack in disguise to collect information, and they found out that the murderer was most likely William Osterman. William had taken over Bell's business and was the one who brought over Sam, promising him a job, which was a complete lie. His sidekick and brother-in-law David Harkness, who was also sleeping with Bell's wife, was the ringleader of the mob. The 2 went unconvicted, and a young person of color died for no reason other than the fact he was a person of color. I wanted to make this case number 1 because it hit home with me for some reason, what with the recent murder of George Floyd. I just can't stand another day or hearing about another case where a person of color is killed by a white person for no reason.
For 10, in the summer of 2014, Derek and Maria Broaddus had just bought their new 6-bedroom, $1.3 million home in Westfield, New Jersey, and began to do some renovations prior to them moving in. While sorting through some mail, they found a small white envelope addressed to the new owner, so they opened it up to begin reading. The letter started off with warm greetings but quickly turned strange. The couple knew the letter was directed to them because it had mentioned the vehicle they drove, the couple's children, as well as the writer's distaste for the renovations that were being done. If this letter wasn't creepy enough, it was signed off as The Watcher. I cannot explain to you guys how quickly I would have had that house back up for sale if I received this letter. Over the next few weeks, the family continued to receive more letters from the Watcher, and the letters began to include more personal information. The couple was unsure of where to go or if they should continue their move into this new house, which I would absolutely say no. The people began to speculate who the Watcher could be, but there was no concrete evidence. Number 9, Cody James and Gary Harker were longtime friends who were working together on Christmas Day in 1979 in Moline, Illinois. They left Cody's shop to head out in the truck to deliver an air compressor to Rock Island, Illinois, and then head to pick up a $500 payment for it in Davenport, Iowa, which they never made it to. The black truck they were driving was found almost 2 months after they had gone missing, and subsequently was put up for auction after not being claimed for 40 days. The bodies of Cody and Gary were found in the truck bed by the men who ended up purchasing it. 25 years after their deaths, the case was still unsolved. A friend of Cody and Gary brought police a roll of film that had been entrusted to him by the men. Cody and Gary gave their friend the film all those years earlier, and they said, "If anything happens to us, develop this film." It is crazy to think that this friend waited 25 years to spill this tea, and that perhaps the men knew what was about to happen to them. Unfortunately, the film didn't give police any solid leads, although the case continues to be investigated. Number 8. On August 6, 1930, New York Supreme Court Judge Joseph Force Crater left a Manhattan restaurant and was never seen again. Joseph had been spending the summer with his wife, Stella Mance Wheeler, in a vacation home they owned in Maine. Joseph had to leave Maine to travel back to New York on August 3rd, but told Stella he would only be a few days. On August 6th, the day of his disappearance, Joseph purchased a ticket for a Broadway performance and headed out for a pre-show dinner where he met his friend, attorney William Klein, along with one of Joseph's many girlfriends, showgirl Sally Lou Ritz. Witnesses stated that Joseph left the restaurant at approximately 9:15 p.m., which was after the start of the show he had planned to attend. In January of 1931, almost 6 months after his disappearance, Stella moved back into their apartment where she reported she found 4 envelopes. One of the envelopes was in Joseph's handwriting and was a list of everyone who owed him money. It was signed, "Love Joe, this is all confidential," and included a messy note that either says, "I am weary" or "I'm very sorry," which either way is a pretty menacing last message for a grieving wife to receive. In 2005, authorities received a potential break in the case when a 91-year-old woman named Stella Ferrucci Good had passed away, leaving a note sealed in an envelope that read, "Do not open until my death." Inside the letter, she implicated 3 men in Joseph's disappearance, but the claims of this letter have never been proven. Number 7. On June 3, 2011, in Bloomington, Indiana, 20-year-old university student Lauren Spirer disappeared after a night out with friends. Lauren was from Greenburgh, New York, but had been attending Indiana University. A few hours after being seen leaving her apartment, her boyfriend texted her only to receive a response several hours later from an employee of a bar who had found her phone. Not much is known about Lauren's disappearance, but it said she left her apartment around 12:30 a.m., stopped at the bar where her phone was found, and was last seen around 4:30 a.m. leaving a friend's off-campus apartment. Over the course of the years, Lauren's family has tried following every lead they had to find out what happened to Lauren, but have yet to find the answers that they deserve. Number 6. This is a story that really gives me the creeps. On April 20th, 1989, Patricia Bernadette Meehan was in a car accident on Highway 200 near Circle, Montana. Witnesses saw her driving her car on the wrong side of the road, which led to her crashing into an off-duty police dispatcher, Carol Heights. Carol was luckily uninjured in the crash and got out of her vehicle right away. Upon exiting her vehicle, Carol saw Patricia also exit her vehicle, walk up to her, and just stare at her without saying a word. Patricia then walked away, climbing over a fence, and stood staring at the accident before walking away and disappearing, which is definitely enough to give me goosebumps. A search began immediately but turned up little results. There have been thousands of reported sightings of Patricia that have potentially given police leads to her whereabouts, but she still has never been found. Number 5. If you've been bored during quarantine, I know that you've turned on Unsolved Mysteries on Netflix and heard the unbelievable story of Lester Eubanks. Lester was a murderer who was convicted and sentenced to prison in 1966 for the killing of a 14-year-old girl named Mary Ellen Diener in Mansfield, Ohio. In December 1973, Lester was part of an honor assignment that gave him an opportunity to be at the mall to do some Christmas shopping. While at the mall, he ended up escaping custody and has been on the run ever since. Through investigations into his family and friends, police were led to a center for troubled youth where he was said to have been working, but Lester was nowhere to be found. The most recent development in this case came recently in 2019 when Lester's biological son agreed to give a DNA sample which could be used to link Lester to recent crimes and maybe give an idea on where he could be hiding. But FBI policy says that you cannot search using another family member's DNA. It's crazy that somebody could be on the run for that long without anybody recognizing or finding them, and it makes me really wonder if anyone in his new life knows about his dark past. Number 4. William Russell Henry was a 57-year-old self-employed landscaper in Tulare, California. On November 5th, 2009, he was last seen at a Home Depot before his truck and trailer were found abandoned and set on fire 4 days later. Upon investigation, the police believe that William was assaulted at his house before going missing, but have not released the evidence that has led them to believe that. William was someone who was well liked by those around him and well known as he had done landscaping for a lot of people around town. Police haven't been able to identify who he was seen with at the Home Depot before disappearing. I wonder if the person he was with is responsible for his disappearance and that's why they haven't come forward with any information. Either way, it's pretty unsettling. Number 3. On November 3rd, 2015, in Spokane, Washington, Deanna Marie Hastings left a note saying she was running a quick errand, but never returned home. Her boyfriend found her car shortly after her disappearance with her phone and purse still inside. Police tracked activity on her credit cards after she had gone missing, which led them to Randy Riley. Randy had stolen Deanna's credit cards and began using them, but denied any involvement in her disappearance. He said he'd met her previously and that she was very drunk and that they had spent a few hours together. A day after their meeting, he said he found her coat on the side of the road with her wallet still inside, which is when he decided to take her cards. Randy was charged with identity theft and possession of stolen property, but is not a suspect in her disappearance. Number 2. This story brings us back to California, but this time to Vallejo. On August 8, 1994, John Wagner Jr. witnessed his drug supplier, Bradley Hoover, commit a murder. John was obviously traumatized by what he had witnessed, but fully cooperated and gave testimony to police. On November 2, 1994, which was John's 26th birthday, his mother called him to wish him a happy birthday. His mother explains that he was still really frightened about what he had witnessed and was having a hard time coping, which I feel like is a pretty reasonable reaction to what he had gone through. Unfortunately, this phone call with his mother was the last time anyone has heard from him. There's not a lot of evidence in his disappearance, and it's unclear whether it was linked to his testimony about the murder he witnessed, as Bradley Hoover didn't end up getting convicted until 2011, but police are still investigating every avenue possible. Number 1. This next one I'm sure you guys have heard about before. On November 24th, 1971, a man who said his name was Dan Cooper boarded a flight from Portland to Seattle. Once the plane was in the air, Cooper handed a note to a flight attendant who assumed the note was Cooper just shooting his shot and giving her his phone number, and she dropped it into her purse without even opening it. Cooper then leaned over and whispered, "Miss, you'd better look at that note. I have a bomb," which is the worst thing for a flight attendant to hear. After showing her the bomb, he began to list his demands: $200,000, 4 parachutes, and a fuel truck standing by in Seattle to refuel the plane for when they arrived. Cooper's been described as being incredibly calm and polite, even though it seems pretty rude to hijack an airplane. At 5:39 p.m., the aircraft landed at Seattle-Tacoma Airport. After receiving the items he had requested, Cooper ordered all the passengers and some of the flight attendants to leave the plane. The plane then took off again, and when it landed in Reno, Nevada, Cooper wasn't on it. The search for Cooper was one of the most extensive in US history. To this day, there are a lot of theories about who this man was and what happened to them, but none of them have been proven yet. I wonder if we'll ever get the answers we're looking for.
Starting off this countdown, we have the stolen work. This mystery revolves around Ernest Hemingway, the well-known American journalist. In 1992, Hemingway's wife Hadley was living in Paris while he was traveling Europe as a reporter. While he was in Switzerland, he wrote to his wife and asked her to join him in Geneva. He also told her to bring with her some of his unpublished manuscripts. So, Hadley packed 4 years' worth of Hemingway's work into a suitcase. Most of the work were originals, not copies. She then boarded the train in Paris and put the suitcase in the luggage compartment. She left for a couple of seconds to get some water, and when she returned, the suitcase was gone along with all his valuable work. Even after getting help searching the train, they were never able to find the suitcase, his work, or the person behind this crime. Moving on to number 9, we have the Marseille Bar Massacre. On October 3rd, 1978, at around 8:10 p.m., 3 armed shooters entered the Bar du Téléphone in Marseille and killed 10 people. All of the victims were shot in the head. Police believe that the attack was a result of gang rivalry. Now, what's frustrating is that during the investigation, no fingerprints were taken and the crime scene was not properly preserved. They also just let reporters go into the crime scene, which messed up all the evidence. No forensic evidence was discovered except for a couple of casings. The case is still unsolved, and no one has been convicted of this massacre. Coming in at number 8, we have the UFO. This is a bizarre case of 5 people who all claim to have seen a UFO in Hérouville, France. On the morning of January 10th, 1998, 3 friends were headed out to a hunting party. Their 4th friend was following them in their own vehicle. That's when all 4 of them saw a giant disc levitating in the sky that was emitting bright lights. Now, this article was in French, so I did my best to translate it, so if I got any details wrong, I apologize. But apparently, they passed out, and when they regained consciousness, they were at the hunting parking lot where they were planning to meet in the first place. There, they found their other friend waiting for them, who also claims to have witnessed this disc in the sky. In fact, one of the witnesses even suffered from burns to their eyes from staring at the disc's bright lights. It said that 5 witnesses to the same event is extremely rare. To this day, we don't know what truly happened or what it is that these men saw. In our 7th spot, we have the Annecy shootings. The Annecy shootings, also referred to as the French Alps shootings, occurred on September 5th, 2012, near the southern end of Lake Annecy. 3 members of a vacationing family from England, along with a passing cyclist, were shot and killed while touring the area. Now, there has been much debate about this case. Police are still trying to figure out if it was just a random killing or if for some reason the family or cyclist was targeted. Now, someone did point out that one of the victims was a skilled aerospace engineer. The other victim, the cyclist, worked for a French nuclear company. What is the probability that 2 highly skilled engineers were in the same place at the same time? Seems like they may have been targeted for their work. Another theory is that it wasn't a professional killing, but more like someone who just killed for the thrill of it. Either way, the shooter has never been caught. In our 6th spot, we have the Burl Triangle. Turns out that France has its very own Bermuda Triangle. The Burl Triangle is a snowy highland area where several unexplained aircraft crashes have occurred. Apparently, more than 60 people have died in unexplainable plane crashes in this area. But that's not all. It's thought that UFOs might be responsible for these crashes. In November of 1943, a Halifax plane crashed in this area. Only 1 person survived. Now, this survivor claims that before the crash, they saw the plane surrounded by, I quote, a multitude of small, multicolored lights. Then in 1963, another plane crash occurred. While this plane went down, witnesses claimed to have seen small pink spheres surrounding the plane. And in 1971, another aircraft went down, killing all 17 of its passengers. However, an extra corpse had been found and never identified. To this day, we don't know what causes these crashes, if UFOs are really responsible for it, and who is the extra body that was found at the scene of the crash. We are now at our 5th and halfway mark with the skull collection. In 2013, a French diver looking for sea urchins stumbled upon a pile of human bones near a seabed in the French Riviera. The remains are an incomplete set, but there are said to be bones from at least 4 different individuals. One of the more mysterious things is a skull with the words, "Death to Pet" written on it in permanent marker. Police don't know what to make of this. It's thought that the bones have been in the water for at least a decade. Out of the bones, 1 is found to have belonged to 17-year-old Stefan Hurston, who disappeared in 1994. The other parts found were a femur from a male, a humerus from a male and female, a skull, and a part of a jaw. But what's weird is that since the writing was on the skull itself, that means the killer would have had to wait until the body fully decomposed to write this message. We don't know who committed these crimes, where the rest of the body parts are, or who the bones belong to. In our 4th spot, we have Jonathan Coulomb. On April 7th, 2004, 10-year-old Jonathan Coulomb was abducted in the middle of the night while at a camp in western France. 6 weeks later, his body was found. He was found at the bottom of a pond, naked, tied up, and weighed down by cinder blocks. An autopsy revealed that Jonathan was suffocated to death, and then his body was discarded of in the pond. This case remained cold for several years. Now, in April of 2000, a German serial killer did come forward saying he was responsible for killing Jonathan, but police are still investigating these claims. We don't know if this is true, so for now, the case remains unsolved. Moving on to number 3, we have Letitia Thoreau. On the evening of May 16, 1937, 29-year-old Letitia Thoreau entered a metro station and boarded the first-class car. She was headed towards central Paris. All the other cars were full, but it was said that the first-class car was empty. The train departed at 6:26 p.m., and 45 seconds later, it arrived to the next stop. That was when Letitia was found murdered. She had a 9-inch dagger in her neck. Yet no one exited the train and no one was in the car with her. And they acted fast. So the mystery remains. Who killed her? Well, after investigations, police discovered that she actually lived a double life. She was apparently working as a spy for the Parisian detective agency. Her job was to infiltrate La Cajole, a French far-right terrorist group. So theory goes that her cover was blown and was murdered by a member of this group. But we still don't truly know. there has never been any arrest for her murder, and French police files on this case are sealed until 2038. In our second spot, we have the dancing plague. Now, I am truly baffled by this case. In 1518, the citizens of France were plagued by a weird illness. Basically, it caused them to dance uncontrollably and unwillingly for days. This lasted for 2 months until it just randomly stopped. It all started in July of 1518 when a woman named Miss Trophia started to begin dancing. She was unable to stop and kept dancing until she passed out. When she woke up, she continued to dance for days. Then suddenly, this happened to 30 more people. Eventually, around 400 people were a victim of this weird dancing plague. In fact, it killed a couple people per day and injured hundreds. Now, there are a couple theories as to what happened. The first theory is that they were possessed by a demon. The second was that their blood was overheating. And the third, probably the most likely, is that they ate bread made from rye flour that was contaminated with ergot. Ergot is known to cause people to convulse. However, these are only theories. This mysterious case has never been solved. But seriously, doesn't it sound like that creepypasta called The Song and Dance Man? It does. And in our number 1 spot, we have Little Gregory. This case remains France's best known unsolved murder case. On October 16th, 1984, 4-year-old Gregory Villman was beside his house playing on a mound of sand. When his mother came out to get him, he was gone. Shortly after, his uncle received an anonymous phone call telling him that Gregory was kidnapped and dumped in the Volon River. It was true. Gregory was found tied up and drowned in this river. After Gregory's death, his parents received anonymous phone calls and hate mail from someone calling themselves Le Corbeau, or the Crow. They threatened getting revenge against the family, especially Gregory's father. Whoever this caller was, they knew private details about the family. To this day, the killer has never been found.
Coming in at number 10, we have the Treasure of Lima. Back when the Spanish had colonized most of Central and South America, they were going to great lengths to collect all the treasures they could find. They wanted to make one of the largest collections of wealth the world has ever seen, and they managed to put together a pretty good pile until revolutions started popping up all over the place. The island of Lima held a massive treasure, and to save it from falling into the hands of the people who were revolting, the Spanish government made a plan to move all the goods to Mexico. This shipment of goods contained several gold statues, rare jewels and metals, and even just straight up cash. Now here's where things get murky. Some people say that the treasure made its way to Mexico. Other people say the treasure was hijacked by William Thomas and his men took the treasure to Cocos Island, but they were arrested and executed before they could come back to claim it. Others say the Mexicans struck a deal with Thomas and now the treasure is hidden. Coming in at number 9, we have the crystal skulls. One of the strangest artifacts that has ever been uncovered in Mexico are the crystal skulls. They are extremely rare and well crafted, and they could have just been pieces of art that were commonly traded for goods back in the 7th and 8th century. This was when the Mayans were a prominent civilization in Mexico. Now, the mystery behind these skulls mixes into a few different areas. First, no one really knows who made them. They are so rare and they are so dispersed. Some of them are even being found in southern countries like Belize. It's unclear how many people had the skill to make such a piece. Also, there is a mystical element to this. There is a legend that says once all 13 skulls are found, it will bring the end of the world. So I guess we should probably stop looking for these things. Coming in at number 8, we have the Dead Zone. Yeah, anything that catches that nickname can't bring something happy. You don't call a place the Dead Zone because it's full of candy and sunshine, unless you're trying to lure kids in there so you can eat them. The Dead Zone is an area in the state of Durango. For whatever reason, it's almost impossible to get any sort of radio waves to pass through this area. If you get lost in there, you might be stuck in this desert until the blazing heat takes you to a dehydrated grave. Now, this has baffled scientists for years, and recently it has been chalked up to an electromagnetic disturbance, but there hasn't been enough research to verify this. Also, many people have made claims of seeing extraterrestrials in the area. Coming in at number 7, we have the death of Mario Amato. This is a wild case with a series of twists and turns. It starts off with two couples heading down from California to Mexico for a nice getaway. The year was 1992. The couples consisted of Mario and his girlfriend Paula, and his brother Joe and his girlfriend Debbie. They all arrived in Mexico at a condo in Rosarito Beach. The couples would be staying there for the weekend. The first night ended with Mario and Paula getting into a vicious argument, which eventually cooled down. The next day, Joe and Debbie were out, and Paula and Mario got into it again, and this time Mario was arrested. When Joe and Debbie came back to the house, no one was there, and Paula arrived later, but Mario was still missing. It was not long after this that the police arrived and told the three of them that Mario was dead. He had hung himself in jail. This was very suspicious, and after an autopsy, it would seem that Mario had a serious injury to his liver before he was hung, and there was a lot of evidence showing that he was murdered, but the police closed the investigation and called it a suicide. Coming in at number 6, we have Where Are the Aztec Rulers? When you go back through time, you can find a lot of the burial sites of ancient rulers. If you go snooping around a pyramid, you might find a sarcophagus that has some old dude who's mummified and he's stuck in there. But the thing with the Aztec rulers is that none of them have been found. Now, this could be for a few reasons. Some people speculate that the Aztecs used to burn their leaders and spread their ashes after they died. But there could be a chance that the remains were kept somewhere sacred and we haven't discovered it yet. Coming in at number 5, we have the Mexican Mothman. A little over a decade ago, there were some very strange reports coming from the town of La Genta, Mexico. People had claimed that they saw a massive winged creature that looked as if it might have been part human. People from all over the city were saying that something that was around 9 feet tall, covered head to toe in hair, and had a massive wingspan was flying over people and following them. The explanation for these sightings has never been solved. This could have been a hoax put together by some local kids who were trying to freak people out, or did Mothman actually work his way down to Mexico for a little visit? Coming in at number 4, we have the Island of Dolls. One of the creepiest things that I have ever seen. The Island of Dolls is a famous tourist attraction that is deep in the jungle close to Mexico City. The former owner of this island found the body of a dead girl who had drowned in a river close by, along with her doll that was floating next to her. He took the doll and hung it up to appease the spirit of the girl. For the next few years, he hung up more dolls to keep the girl's ghost happy, until one day when the man was found dead. He drowned in the exact same spot as the girl. No one knows how he died in that exact spot. Coming in at number 3, we have Gordon Collins. Another story of couples heading down to Mexico for a little trip. Maybe you should go in groups of 3 and then you'll be fine. Gordon, his girlfriend, and his 2 friends went down to Mexico for vacation. They were supposed to stay there for a week. One day they rented a boat and they went out to do some fishing, but a huge storm hit and 3 of their bodies were found dead in the water. It was thought that Gordon was also dead from the storm until a few days later when he was seen walking around the fishing village. His parents came down to find him, but after following a trail of sightings, he was nowhere to be found. Then he popped up in Cabo San Lucas. His parents chased him down again, and once again, he was nowhere to be found. After this, 70 sightings of him were reported, but he was never found by anyone looking for him. It's thought that he might have been suffering from amnesia. Coming in at number 2, we have Meja Island. How can you make a whole island disappear? Well, it seems like somehow someone did this. The Meja Island was apparently an island just off the coast of the Yucatan in the Atlantic Ocean. There are documents recording the location of this island that date back over 400 years, but in the 1970s, it would seem that the island existed no more. The location of where the island apparently was is now just an open area of ocean. Not even like the island sunk below sea level because of rising water levels. No, there's no trace of this island ever being in the area. There are rumors that the United States destroyed the island so they could travel through the area without breaking international charter laws, but if they did this, how did they do it? And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have Chichen Itza. This is one of the most famous structures in the world, built by the ancient Mayan civilization. It stands as one of the wonders that will blow anyone's mind. This is a similar mystery akin to the pyramids. There are rooms inside Chichen Itza that are built so perfectly that you can hear into other rooms, and it's said high-ranking officials would wait in these rooms and eavesdrop on conversations so they could seem like they had godly knowledge. There's also a point at the front of the pyramid that produces an amazing echo response. When you clap at the front of this point, it sends out a noise that can be heard a kilometer in every direction. It's these amazing feats of ingenuity that make people wonder, how did they build it? I know a lot of you people think that aliens built the pyramids, and I know you guys know that I love conspiracy theories, but I'm going to go on a different angle. The mystery is, what technology did they have? Everything they built was so precise. We still have no idea how they did it. There are points in Chichen Itza that are lined up perfectly with the points of north, south, east, and west. So the question stands, how did they do it?